And there we go. As we go live, and I can see me. And if I switch this up to a two-shot, I can see everybody, all three of us, in fact, with Alex Ayling and Carrie Rad. Alex, also known as Alex the Vagabond. Thanks for joining me today, guys. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Our pleasure.
Now, you are in isolation. I have to say, for me, doing podcasting, managed isolation has been great. because I've been able to access people and they've been like, oh God, I'm grateful for being in isolation, but it's been 2 weeks and yes, please talk to us. It's an hour that'll take up our time. So it's been quite a positive thing for me not being in isolation, having that in this country, because it's helped with several podcasts actually. So yeah,
it's like people are staying put. They don't have much to do, so it's like, I got you.
Yeah.
We'll have a conversation. We don't have anybody else to talk to. So no, but we would have done this even on the outside.
I believe you. Millions wouldn't, but I do believe you. But I have heard from a couple of people. I spoke to a journalist who was in isolation at one point, that there is actually a bit of structure and a bit of timetabling when you're in there. Like he had, a COVID test on this date, and their sector had eating at this time and exercising at that time. Is that what it is like for you guys? Is it pretty structured, and there is some sort of structure around the day so you don't quite go mad?
Definitely. Very structured, but also just extremely well organized, and has left us just applauding. Honestly, the whole scenario, it's gone down really smoothly, and I think there's a reason why New Zealand is in the position that it is right now. And I think that that's because of how well organized this whole program is.
Yeah, and I think as mundane as it can be to be in the same room for 2 weeks, you're right, there is a routine to it. So you kind of know what you're going to expect every day. It's not a surprise at every turn. There are a couple surprises, like our blue wristbands, for instance, like they kind of came in one night, or not in, but they came to the door one night and they were like, okay, you're blue now, which means that you're a little bit safer. You've had 2 of your COVID tests.
Right.
And so there's little moments like that where you're like, okay, cool. Like, it's almost like you got
having
propped up.
Having people in military uniforms knock on your door at 9 p.m. is definitely kind of like, did we do anything wrong?
You get a blue bracelet now, and we're like, yay!
So no, it's all structured, it's organized. Regarding the COVID tests, we got here on January 11th, and I believe there's a new protocol that got implemented on the 15th that would have required us as Americans or coming from America to have a negative COVID test before we boarded.
Right.
So, but because we were coming from America, and I guess also people coming from the UK, which are considered higher risk because of these new strains, we had to do a COVID test on arrival, and then again on day 3, and now today, which is day 11 or 12, we're not quite sure. We did our final COVID tests. So, but all of them have been negative, which is great. And go to the elevator, hold your breath, and that's kind of like where they say you got the highest percentage chance of catching it.
Really?
Here.
I did not know that. Elevators.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody's going in the elevator. They have an elevator specifically for staff, which is smart, so that the staff doesn't have to go in the elevator with the rest of us and manage isolation. But they said if there's any way for you to catch COVID while you're here, it's in the elevator.
Yeah. But we're on the 16th floor, so it's like.
It's like my kids do this thing when we're driving, especially out in country roads. Apparently it's quite common. I didn't do it when I was a kid, maybe because they didn't have cars. But that was they hold their breath when they're going across a bridge. So
there's that. There's also the graveyard one, or going through a tunnel.
That was always my thing.
Yeah.
Kind of do that.
What I typically do, I mean, we'll get on to your story shortly, Alex, and obviously Carrie as well. But Alex, you know Dunedin well because you studied here. But going out to the airport, there's a bridge, and if it's nice and quiet, what I tend to do is stop in the middle of the bridge and force them to either have to breathe or pass out. Either option is normally okay.
Yeah, right.
But just speaking of what you've just said, though, because of course in America at the moment, there's been a pretty big change in the last 24 hours. But for people who aren't aware of this yet, it seems that it just today, I mean, this is, even though we are live streaming, we're not like a breaking news show, obviously, but at the moment, just coming out recently, Biden has just said that international travelers are now going to have to quarantine in the US, and there's going to be masks on planes as well. So straight away, you know, you're talking about how well New Zealand's doing. We are a bit smug. Like, I'm aware New Zealanders are a bit smug about this whole thing, but every time I talk, I always say, as we are today. You know, in 6 months from now, it may be very different. You know, we've got our own Dr. Fauci is all kind of saying, if that new strain gets into the community, it'll be a shit show. But as of today, there's this research done that ranked all the countries' lockdowns and how they've done them, and it gave them a score out of 100. Yeah. New Zealand was 96 point something, and I think the next closest was about 75. And so when you see it put into a kind of academic paper where they've written, you know, this, I mean, and it measured things like bars closed, restaurants closed, you know, all that kind of stuff. You can see why, I guess, the Labour-led government has enabled us to get to this point where, you know, we're still going to cricket games, and we're not having to hold our breaths when we're out of isolation going down in elevators. Although I do notice, you know, I go to the supermarket because during our lockdown here of 4 or 5 weeks, whatever it was a very strange and weird scenario. It was about as close as I ever want to get to sort of an apocalyptic feel, that you're kind of avoiding people and, you know, no one on the streets. I noticed that if you did have to go to a supermarket, you'd walk past people and you'd look away from them, so you wouldn't be breathing. I do notice myself still doing that occasionally, just out of habit.
We have full-blown post-COVID PTSD. Like, you know,
it's real.
It's real. And, you know, we lived in Los Angeles. LA was one of the hardest hit cities in the country.
So when you're talking about apocalyptic, like, that's what
it's like
it actually felt
like. You know,
I'm
pretty sure I saw that Biden in the last couple of months had a conversation or multiple conversations with Cinda, asking about how New Zealand's quarantine, how everything's been working. And, you know, while I don't want to make things too political, I do think that, you know, New Zealand right now is really having a moment where they are, you know, this country is shining comparatively. It's an outlier in the world. And I don't know if the average Kiwi really understands just how good you have it right now. I mean, there's 400,000 deaths in the United States from COVID. If there were 400,000 deaths here in New Zealand, that would be like a tenth of the population almost, you know?
But even if you went to the per capita, I mean, America's about 60 times our size. So, you know, a 60th of 400,000, well, a tenth would be 4, so it would be 24,000. If there was 24,000 deaths, that's not a 60th, is it? That's nowhere near. That's more like half. Must be 2,500 deaths. 2,500 deaths. So that would be horrific. You know,
and there's only been 25 here. You know, comparatively, I saw a guy. You know, I tend not to dive into the muck with comments online. But somebody had asked me what I thought America could learn from New Zealand's response to COVID-19. And somebody, an elderly gentleman, Kiwi, had commented, you know, about kind of just complaining about, obviously, the situation, like economically, it's not great, but, you know, when you compare where New Zealand is, I mean, just even for us looking outside right now, we see people walking around with masks, sitting on a park without masks, sitting on a park bench next to each other, having conversations. There was a concert the other night. Like, all of this for us is just,
we were like, oh my gosh, there's live music in the distance. You know? It's bizarre. But from the moment that we got off the plane, we were so impressed by how everything is being handled. It's safe, it is efficient, and it's also done in a kind manner. Like, it, you know, coming from another country, being here, being considered high risk on arrival, and then going into a bus and then being put into a managed isolation, it's definitely an interesting feeling, and one you've never experienced before. And so having people around, like friendly Kiwis who have just been like, even the military, when he came in, like he had his mask on and everything, and he was safe and efficient, but he was also kind, and he was like, we're here to keep you safe. And we've just been really impressed.
Not to mention the reaction from all of our Kiwi followers and people who just kind of found us, offering to bring us care packages. We've had multiple people bring us groceries and magazines and all sorts of little things like that. And it really is just, I think that is one of the most amazing aspects of the Kiwi character is, the default to kindness. And so
well, it was actually, and you're probably aware of this, but it was actually something that the Prime Minister said from day one: be kind to one another. Like it was one of the driving things that we aimed to do at the start of the lockdown. So much so that we have, everyone has those motorway overpasses that are electronic and then can change. There's an accident 1.2 kilometers ahead or whatever, but some of the motorway overpasses were saying be kind. So it was something that we actively tried to do. I spoke to a journalist here in New Zealand, Jack Tame, who actually went across to the election. And he was someone I spoke to in managed isolation. And when he explained to me that you get off the plane with a police officer and you turn up to managed isolation and there's the armies there, I kind of thought, unless you explain what you guys are saying, how kind everybody is and how it's working, you can kind of see how the Laura Ingrams of this world kind of try and sell a story about, isolation camps, I think is what she said. Because if all you heard was the police escort you off the plane and then you're under the supervision of, the army for 2 weeks, it does sound a little bit heavy-handed. But as you say, we like context in this podcast, and you guys giving it that, and you'll see no guns coming up with your military or with your police, but just kindness. That's a lovely thing to hear, because I hope, I kind of agree, but I also hope, because there's dicks in every country, but that we are kind to people no matter who they are, where they're from.
Yeah, and it's important. It's such a simple thing, kindness. It really is. And I think sometimes people might overlook it when you say, just be kind, because they hear it all the time. But in reality, it's such a simple thing that goes such an extremely long way. And
we've kind of just, even I can't tell you how many fights I saw break out in parking lots at grocery stores in LA during the pandemic. Like, people are so high strung and people are angry. And, when you lose that default to, to respect and kindness towards strangers, like, a really important element of the social contract is broken, and it makes going out into the world feel a whole lot more stressful and anxiety ridden and dangerous. And, as a person who's traveled quite extensively and have been brought into the homes of strangers and fed by people and, given a roof over my head in far-flung corners of the world, I really do believe that, like, people inherently are good. And you have to, lead with that, because if you lead with the opposite, if you lead with the fear of, people are bad, they're going to do bad things to me, and I shouldn't trust you, that's what you get.
One of the best moments in Biden's inauguration yesterday was when he looked at his representatives and he said that he hired on, and he said,
"Oh yeah,
if I hear one of you mistreat another person, I will fire you on the spot."
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's kind of like kindergarten all over again, but it kind of feels like we need that,
You learn these things in kindergarten, but they're crucial.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think I personally have started a thing in the end of last year, and we've been told to be kind to one another, which I think is really important. But I think the thing that a lot of people have missed is being kind to ourselves. And I started a little kind of series of Instagram videos and things where I explained how I won't belabor the story because I've told it a couple of times, but how I was at a primary school kids show. And they did a review of the year. And one of the things they did, of course, was they repeated and replayed with one of the children playing Jacinda the day we went into level 4 lockdown. And I realized I was having a reaction to it. Like I heard the sound and I heard the words, and inside I was like, holy crap, there's stuff here I haven't quite, either let go of or sorted out. And I don't want to be too dramatic, and I won't use the words PTSD or panic attack, but there was definitely something visceral there that I went through and I felt. And from then I've been for myself, and sort of encouraging others to do as well, is to start measuring ourselves. If we feel the need to measure ourselves on our successes from last year, not our failures. Because I reckon one success in 2020 is probably worth about 20 successes any other year, because 2020 was such an abysmal year for those things. And to be kind to ourselves as well. And I explained that I'm sitting in a studio at home. I had to give up my studio in central Dunedin, and because I couldn't use it, and there was a lot of things financially and business wise, like a lot of people did, not complaining about it, especially living in New Zealand, that didn't quite hit that I was aiming for. But I built a studio. I'm operating out of home now. I did about 80 podcasts during that lockdown period through to the end of the year. So kind of looking at the pros and going, not only were they cool or good or fun or whatever, but in 2020, it's like not just one tick, you get 3 ticks for those ones, because it was a bitch of a year. And mind you, and just to finish by saying, and it hasn't finished. People are like, oh, New Year's Eve 2021, we've got rid of that year. Yeah, we've got a ways to go. Yeah, we ain't quite there.
Yeah, I mean, tell us about it. With that, we rolled right into that crazy shit in January 6th, which was like watching a horror film. But apart from that, I think, yes, celebrating your successes and focusing on the positive elements of what happens in your day-to-day life.
Even the most ordinary moments, right? Like we're here in lockdown, and there's not, it can be hard to find the joy in a hotel room, right, of the day. And so on day 3 of lockdown, I took sheets of paper out of my journal, and on the back side of each journal, I wrote 3 through 14, because that was how many days we had left. Right. And so I said, okay, every night when the day is done, we're going to flip this over, and on the back side where the lines are, we're going to write 3 highlights of the day.
She taped them up on the window.
And so not only has it been really useful to remember what day we're on, because it can really, that can be a difficult part. But another part of it is that you really just have to find the good where you can. And I'm not even talking about just being grateful for, I have a roof over my head, which of course those things are important, but it's about going further and saying, okay, what was the highlight of this very mundane day? And you can really relate that with 2020, when you're like, for us in Los Angeles, we were self-isolating at home. It was very similar to what we're doing now, because we wanted to be safe and keep others safe. So we stayed home. I wish I would have implemented this then, because, it can just be a really nice way. Even the simplest things, like I had pasta for lunch, and it's my favorite, I love pasta. So like little things like that, it really does make a difference.
No, totally. It's like a paradigm shift. When you start looking for the positive versus focusing on the negative, it's easier to see the good things that happen in your life, which makes you happier, which makes you more likely to go out and start doing things and start actuating change in your own life. It's like a circle, right? So no, it's true. Celebrate your small successes. And looking back on 2020, I can guarantee you that if you were thinking the opposite direction, if you were just focusing on negative, then it would be way too overwhelming to even begin to try to look at 2020 as a whole. But if you take into account that, yes, 2020 sucked overall, but here were the good things that happened in my life, and here was how I, challenged myself to make lemonade out of lemons or whatever, you'd be like, damn, we had some good lemonade.
And this moment will likely end up on our highlight.
Totally. We were saying like later in life, we're going to look back at this and say, holy shit, what an experience.
Yeah, to just overall this entire experience of just doing this, deciding to move to New Zealand, and just, for a piece of information, we were going to move to New Zealand before the pandemic ever hit. And I think that that's important to know for a lot of our followers might, I've reiterated that, because I think, it's not we made this decision in 2019 when we visited New Zealand, and it just so happened that we were able to make it work during this time. It took us a long time. We started before the pandemic hit. We were supposed to be here looking at houses in March of...
Right, as March 10th was our flight from LA come to New Zealand. And on the 9th, we were reading the news, looking at each other saying, if we get on that flight tomorrow night, we might not be coming back. And we are, by no means are we ready to, we're not prepared. We had rental, we had our dog, we had all sorts of, furniture and blah, 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 blah. So we decided to postpone the flight. Air New Zealand was super understanding and gave us a flight credit, which was good for 2 years. And then, we were able to start working towards getting all of our little ducks in a row.
And our mind was like, okay, well, by January of 2021, things will be better.
Well, it was more like by June of 2020. At first, it was it was kind of marketed along the do your bit to stop the spread, stay home, and it's only going to be 3 weeks, and the virus will get clamped down.
I think officially, wasn't it? There's only 15 cases. It'll soon go down to 0. Wasn't that the official line in America at a while?
I mean, in the big, there's been so much misinformation.
Yeah.
There's been, and that also has been what has made 2020 so taxing mentally.
Yeah.
I mean, the cases of anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder,
suicide,
schizophrenia, it's all gone through the roof in 2020. And it's sad. It really is, because yes, things are difficult, but I think that one of the good signs from it all is that mental health has been even more destigmatized. Talking about mental health, talking about struggling with feelings and emotions, and more people are seeking help in order to talk through these things. And I think that that's at least one of the benefits that's come from that.
For a lot of us, it wasn't just the feelings of we're in a global pandemic, but on top of that, a lot of us were really disheartened and fearful of what was happening politically. And so it was double. It was a double whammy, and it just kind of felt really heavy, and for so many people. And that's all over the world, right? In the United States we felt that way, but that's a similar feeling that so many people all over the world have experienced together. And I think there's something in that, right? We all just, I think the really important thing is empathy. Like you talked about before, on your guys' freeway, it says be kind. And I feel extremely hopeful with where things will go in the future. And I think that hindsight is 2020, right? Pun intended. It's you looking back, you're gonna go, okay, there are good things that came from this. It is so hard to see it when you're in it, and it's even hard to see it now. But there will be a day where we're gonna look back and we're gonna be like, wow, we learned how to do this. We learned this. If this ever happens again, we got this. And yeah,
it's kind of I likened that to, well, I've broken a lot of bones in my life, skateboarding and snowboarding, and I've snapped fingers and wrists and all sorts of stuff. And, they do say that when you break a bone, if it's set properly and it's done in the right amount of time, it actually makes the bone stronger, right? So, hopefully 2020 was that year where, we broke it, but we can rebuild it and come back stronger.
It sounds like the $6 billion man, eh? We can rebuild him. I was just to, the be kind thing to one another, I think is important. I was just going to say one other thing, and then we'll move on, because we'll let people know, because they're going to hear the American accents and things like, we hear that these celebrities like Russell Howard are getting into New Zealand to perform, but who are these guys coming into our country? There's good reasons for that, and we'll get onto that shortly. But I was just going to say, you said earlier that here in New Zealand, sometimes we wonder if you're wondering if we don't quite get a grasp of it, because we're basically living as if COVID doesn't exist. I mean, once you get out of managed isolation, we're basically the life is going on almost like COVID's not out there. What happens to me is I see international sporting events and I see no crowds and I go, oh, crumbs, that's right. Because here in New Zealand, we've got, we've had cricket going on. We've got cricket coming up shortly. And cricket's never really full stadiums, but, there's 5, 10, 20,000 people there. Russell Howard, the comedian's in town in New Zealand at the moment. He's doing a 16-gig tour. I'm going to his Dunedin show on the 4th of Feb. And it's not until you see, the NBA with empty stands or, the Football League in the UK. And then you start to see the stories about, might have been in the UK, it was like a 16-story hospital. Each story had 29 people on it. All of them were COVID patients. It's a bit of a not a slap in the face like an offensive way, but it's a wake-up call. It's a reminder. Because you do get, I don't think we get quite complacent, although I think after the first lockdown, there certainly was some complacency. And I think there is probably a little bit of that now. But I guess through a combination of mostly good management and a little bit of good luck, because nothing's perfect.
And geographic.
And geographically, that's probably part of the luck as well, I guess, because, that we're able to do these things and the complacency, if there is some, hasn't quite bit us in the bum yet. So, welcome to a COVID-free New Zealand, hopefully, if it stays that way.
I mean, fingers crossed, and we're very, very grateful to be here. And to clarify, I am actually also a New Zealand citizen. I'm a dual citizen of the United States and of New Zealand. I was born in America, but I've been coming back and forth to New Zealand throughout my entire life. But just a bit more perspective before we can stop talking COVID and downer stuff. I mean, 400,000 Americans have died from COVID so far. That's more than all of the casualties from the Second World War combined in America. So, I mean, if you were to think about it like that, and I know that New Zealand is very, the lest we forget, and the Anzac contributions and Gallipoli, and I have family members who are on the wall, at the memorial wall in Auckland at the museum there, who died in the First World War. Mm-hmm. But just putting that into perspective, it's like when you remove the idea of this nebulous little virus floating around and you just look at the casualties. I mean, there's photos from New York City where they had to take over huge tracts of land on an island off the coast of New York, where they literally turned that into mass graves, from COVID. And it's like, it's real, and it's scary. And we have a lot of friends who work in healthcare and are nurses and have been at it like nonstop for 10 plus months now. And you just have to think of the emotional fatigue that these people are going through, the healthcare professionals who are living that every single day in those hospitals. So, those are the real heroes.
Definitely.
So like you said, now, did you say I thought you were born in New Zealand. Were you born in America, but your dad's a Kiwi, or were you actually born in New Zealand?
So I'm born in America.
Okay.
My dad's a Kiwi. He was born in Hawke's Bay, and
born and raised. He moved here?
Yeah, he moved to America when he met my mom when he was traveling abroad in Europe. They met on a train and fell in love. I know, it's kind of a funny story. He was a flight attendant, and he was bumming around and doing his OE. And they met and fell in love, and he ended up coming to visit for Christmas in California, and then just kind of, stuck around. But he was the honorary consul for New Zealand in San Diego for 20 plus years, I think.
Wow, cool.
So he's been, we grew up going to the local British pub to watch All Blacks games at random hours of the 3 in the morning, stuff like that.
Dedicated.
Yeah. So, New Zealand has always been a really big part of my life. And I think growing up as a dual citizen, having the awareness of the fact that I have family and friends in this island across the ocean on the other hemisphere, it always kind of helped me have a bit more global perspective, understanding that the world is bigger than just the city or the neighborhood that you grow up in, and kind of understanding that the world's a big place full of really interesting people, and wanting to go and explore it.
So to let other people know as to one of the reasons we're chatting, I always like chatting with interesting people, but both of you guys do a fair amount on YouTube, and just if people are watching, they'll be able to see some of the things I'm about to bring up. It seems that Alex, you started. You got to be. I got to be so careful saying the name of your original sort of thing with your brother.
Vagabond.
But you do have to be careful pronouncing that one.
Yeah, you don't want to mispronounce that one.
Yeah. So the Vagabrothers, and that I guess it's really good. And what I love about kind of independent media at the moment, which is what I call it, you might call it something different, is you've got a series from all these countries all over the world. I won't go play series. I meant to open it up on YouTube. Look at that. But the clips, like I'm just opening up the one from India, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 12 minutes, 5 minutes. So people can get a taste of what you guys were doing in a short amount of time. YouTube channel there with a million subscribers from that channel, and then you went on and started doing some of your own stuff and labeled Alex the Vagabond in 2016. But also Carrie, you've got your own YouTube going on, your own stuff going on. And the way I've coined it for the kind of write-up for this is I've taken two little words out of your write-up, wellness and lifestyle. Would that be a fair way to sort of assess your overall YouTubing, Carrie?
Yeah, self-growth. I've gotten into a lot of gardening as well, and just a harmonious lifestyle, like living the best life that you can, and learning to shift mindset to positivity and self-care and self-love. And you talked about it at the beginning, and I was like immediately like, yes, I like him, because you were talking about it's not just about, like, it's about how you take care of yourself and how you love yourself, and that's essentially what I've kind of always created content about.
Yeah, I'll send you. I've only done 2 or 3 of them, but I'm doing like a little series, and I'm using the hashtag "You Be Kind to You." The letter U, the letter B, KIND, the number 2, and the letter U. I've only just started it, but from that experience I talked about earlier that I had last year, I realised how important it is that we be kind to ourselves. Not to say don't be kind to others, but as well. So I'll when we're finished all this, I'll send you an email with what I'm doing, and you can have a look at it for yourself.
Love it.
I think it's more important than ever now too, because like there's a lot of great things that social media has done. It allows you to connect with people all over the world and to share perspectives, and to learn a lot of stuff. But at the same time, on the dark side of it, it's like it's very easy to get caught up in, you get a glimpse of somebody's lifestyle who's in a completely different place than you, and it leaves you feeling less than and desirous of more. And so those two emotions combined can oftentimes lead you to think that, like, well, I don't have what Kim Kardashian has, and therefore
thank goodness.
Yeah. I mean, so, I think that there's a lot that we can learn about, and it's happening as we go, but it's really important to kind of, like you said, be kind to yourself, realize that everybody's journey is an individual one, and we do the best with what we have, right?
Yeah, I also think, and you guys will probably understand this, being kind of, as they say, content creators for the average person, just people who make shit, is that we typically are our own worst critics as well. And we typically look at something and we go, it's not good enough. Whereas often you'll find, and I'm sure you've experienced this, and I've experienced this in various things that I've done, other people will look at it and go, oh, that was amazing. And we tend to measure ourselves very harshly. And as I said earlier, often based on our failings rather than well, I think not measuring yourself is probably a better path, because why do I care? If I'm happy and whatever, why do I care about where my standing in that particular area is? But if we are going to measure ourselves, we should do it based on our good stuff, not our crap stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, it's like, if you are going to compare to yourself yesterday or a year ago, and say, like, Do I feel like I'm continuing to learn and continuing to pursue whatever path it is that I've chosen, and is it giving me happiness? And if it's not, then maybe time to switch it up, you know?
Oh, it's like one of those classic things, you know, like someone who is in a weight loss thing sort of thing. They might still be, 50 kilos overweight, but if they've lost 10, they should be celebrating the 10, not being disappointed that they've still got in their journey a long way to go. So it's a pretty,
And they should look at it with pounds, because then it's double. Two and a half. You lost 10 kilos. That's like 25 pounds. That's huge.
I think it's 2.2 technically. That'd be 22. I think so.
I'm gonna have to learn that.
So you guys are YouTubers. That's your profession. That's what you do. I always, because people ask me what do I do, and I always kind of go, oh crap, how do I answer this? But what I typically think about is, where does my income come from? That's how I think about what I do. As in, what they're asking me is, what's your job, sort of thing. So YouTubing is your job. I'm assuming that goes along with sort of blogging and vlogging and various other written things. I was wondering, I guess I can see, Carrie, how your sort of thing will continue fairly easily from New Zealand. But Alex, your travel thing, it's obviously we're one of the most expensive countries in the world to get anywhere from, to go places, because we're right down the bottom and there's not the population to put 40 flights on a day. Obviously, I'm assuming there's going to be New Zealand feature of New Zealand at the start, because you can do that. But how's that going to impact your travel, YouTubing lifestyle?
Well, I personally, as much as I would love to believe that international travel a la 2019 or 2018 is going to be back and running in the next couple of years, I also have to temper that with a bit of realism, which is, even with the vaccine coming out, I do think that, the ability to freely move around the world, like at 2019 levels, it's going to take a while to get back to that. And, while it's all traveling at the pace that I was traveling can be exhausting as well. And I think that moving forward in terms of international travel, like shifting to New Zealand in the Southern Hemisphere, you may feel like you guys are far away from everything that's happening, but that maybe that's from a American or Eurocentric point of view. Like you're also much closer to a lot of places that are extremely expensive and difficult to get to when you're in the United States or in Europe, such as the Pacific Islands.
So Antarctica becomes the place you want to go to.
Well, in Dunedin, all you have to do is like hop in a boat and you're there in 25 minutes.
Also Fiji, the Cook Islands, like
Australia.
Well, I was going to say, have you guys seen this came out yesterday? Thank God for this travel bubble. High Emotion is first quarantine-free flights arrive from Rarotonga. So Rarotonga looks like it's opening up.
Yeah, we were in Rarotonga December of last year in 2019.
One of the most beautiful places in the world I have ever.
Yeah, I have a video on my personal channel, on the Alex the Vagabond channel, which kind of documented the 2-week trip that we took there, and I would love to go back. But I think, to answer your question in short form, I'm really looking into expanding and diversifying the type of stories that I tell.
Right.
I would like to get into more documentary work, more potentially narrative work. I would love to plug into the film industry here in New Zealand, which is cranking and vibrant and super creative. And
this was all bubbling before travel wasn't able to happen.
Yeah.
If you were thinking about how you could diversify and think about things, because you were getting tired, I remember, of traveling week by week. And
I mean, I spent a decade of my life like full nomadic pretty much, and it was an amazing way to spend my 20s. And now, as I'm moving into my kind of early to mid 30s, I really would like to explore different avenues of storytelling and documentary work, potentially narrative work. I mean, obviously I would love to work for Phil Jackson. Just saying. I'm going to keep throwing that out there.
Manifest it.
I'm going to manifest that. This is not the first time I've said that, but, you know, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and I'm a big fan of his work, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the Beatles documentary that they're working on down there at Wingnut Productions. So I don't know. I think I'm quite excited actually for the change of pace and the change of direction. And I think that in life, you know, just because something's working well for you doesn't mean that you have to keep doing it. You know what I mean? I think that sometimes in life it's worthwhile to take a moment, reassess your trajectory, and if needed, you know, course adjust. And for me,
go where you're being called.
I've always been called to come and live like a longer chapter of my life in New Zealand, and I'm lucky that my partner, my wife, wanted to come too. She fell in love with New Zealand after our first trip here, and while it is kind of a big change to make, especially in the midst of all of the stuff that's happening in the world right now, it was something that's been brewing for a long time, and it really actually we're quite excited to have been able to kind of pull the trigger, make the move, and now the future is unwritten. And I don't know, sometimes in life when you don't have a clear idea of what's coming tomorrow, life kind of gets interesting again, you know?
Yeah.
Invigorating. It's about that breaking from that comfort zone, and it makes you think, well, what else can I do if I'm willing to be courageous? Because it's not about being fearless. Like I told Alex today when we were walking in the parking lot in circles, I said, that's the outdoor time that we get.
Yeah.
I just said, it's not that I'm not afraid of what we're doing. There are moments where it's absolutely terrifying, right? But courage is about looking that in the eye and saying, how can I grow and learn from this? Like,
and keep going in the face of it.
I don't have the connections to New Zealand that Alex does. And for me, I'm going into this completely kind of awe-inspired and interested to see where it takes us. And people do this all the time. You know, people migrate to different places to take risks. And this is what about being human is about. And I think you're right. I think a lot of the times, like, it can be hard. You know, we had an article and we saw some comments about people. There was an article in stuff.co article, and there were comments of, you know, some Kiwi people, rightly so, talking about us being there. And you know, I think that I'm really excited to be here to learn about New Zealand and to learn about the culture and to give everything that I can back to this country too, and to work here and to give the parts of me that I can. And I think that that's the way it should be. And I think that it's been a really warm welcome overall, very much so. And I can just feel like that warm embrace and just the warm people all around us. And we're just excited to, like, I'm Alex's wife here, you know what I mean? Like, obviously I will make my own, and I'm excited to do that, but he is, like, his father was born and raised here, and his, like he said, his ancestors are they fought, you know, to for their time to be you know, in the museum here, the Aylings, and I'm part of that by being his wife, and I'm excited to be here, you know.
I wanted to go back real quick though to your comment about you know, people asking you what you do, right? And in our case, I've been making videos on YouTube, and Carrie has as well, for almost a decade now.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, telling people that you know, when they were asking what I do, well, you know, I am a videographer, I am an editor, I am a host, I am a director, I'm a producer, I am a writer, I am I mean, the list goes on, a photographer, filmmaker, the list goes on, right? But when you try to squeeze it down into one thing, because humans like simplicity, right? They don't like a long list of what you do and who you are. So they want to slap a label on you. In the beginning, the label YouTuber was like, it had like a tinge to it. It was like, oh yeah, well, you're not really all that serious because, you know, people make money from their bedroom talking to a video camera. But now there was a poll in the United States in 2019 with children under 18, asking them what they wanted to be. And you know what the number one response was?
What, YouTuber? Twitch streamer?
YouTuber.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing mass media adopting, it's kind of a convergence, right? You're seeing YouTube stars becoming filmmakers, becoming television hosts, becoming, you know, pretty pop stars, whatever they want. And you're seeing the opposite happening from the traditional media people who are saying, you know what, I need to have a YouTube channel. I need to have a social presence. I need to be making content here to remain relevant, right? So I don't know. I think, yes, I am a YouTuber. That's the platform where I publish the most to, but I don't want to be constrained by a title. And I think that, yeah, I'm excited for like future endeavors and different formats.
Well, it always gets complicated for multifaceted people, right? When someone's like, well, what do? You're like, well, I do a lot of different things and I don't know how to tell you what it is. So I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, it feels funny, like, you know, people have things that they repeat quite a bit, and there's like shot drinking games stuff. I always talk about these two comedians. I feel like I talk about them every single podcast, but it's relevant to talk about them now because they host they do a podcast, which is hosted on YouTube as well as the audio version, called Two Bears, One Cave. Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer. They literally. Oh, you like them?
Yeah, I like Tom Segura probably more than I like the other guy. But yeah, they're funny.
They had a conversation the other day where they were talking about this exact thing, because I think it makes me a bit sad to hear about people coming from mainstream media to the digital medium and kind of going to stay relevant. Because there's a guy who's just come off ESPN who, I can't think of his name, but he's turned down big, massive contracts because he wants the freedom to do his own thing. I think the coolest thing is when you see people moving away from the $1 million paycheck, American dollars, not New Zealand dollars, because they want more freedom. And these two comedians were having this conversation. They're best friends, and they do a podcast every week. And they were like, this hypothetical conversation, what would it cost for us to go and do this on Comedy Central? And Tom basically said, well, I wouldn't enjoy it anymore, so it would be $50 million a year, because they'd have to pay a fee for me not to be able to do what I want to do. So there's this element of freedom that I think comes in the medium that we do right now. Like, so for example, my background is in radio. I was in commercial radio for 20 years. I get onto this platform and I go, I can, as long as I don't slander someone and break like libel laws, I can do and say whatever I want on this podcast, and it's really freeing. And yeah, I don't have a paycheck at the end of each week paid for by 9 minutes of advertising an hour. But there is, I think the beauty about seeing people come from mainstream to these sorts of mediums is the freedom they get to do what they want, how they want. I think going the other way from this sort of medium to the mainstream, I don't know if that works that well. Because all of a sudden you've got 7 producers telling you what you should say, what you shouldn't say, what the audience is doing. Whereas this medium, and you guys have experienced this, is more a build it and they will come. You find your audience, then exactly what you want to do is what they want to see because they've found you.
I think also though, like I know a lot of creators, and I've been plugged into the world of creators for years, and I think that there's an element of wanting to have something happen from a mainstream point of view to be able to like say that you've like quote unquote made it, because I think that like there's a lot of hustle. You want to like make something, and even if you have 1 million subscribers, like you still can sometimes feel like, well, not until I get a show on, Netflix do I feel like I've like truly made it, or whatever that is. But I think that that's also kind of empty,
Not only is it empty, I feel like it's not valid because I guess a lot of the times, I like, you're right. I think a lot of people think, okay, well, I want to get on Netflix, Hulu so that I can feel legitimate, because a lot of the time maybe people don't take YouTubers as seriously. And I completely see that point of view. But the problem and the error there is in the perspective of the person looking at this successful person who has built their own platform, who has put time and effort into creating something that is completely their own. And like you said, they have complete freedom in that. I did acting jobs before, and I loved being an actress. It was great. But I was acting while I was YouTubing, and I just stopped acting. And I told my agent, and I'm not saying I'll never do it again for fun because it's my passion, but when it came to work and what I wanted to really pay attention to and put my efforts into was something that was so freeing, that was mine, that was my own, that I could create from nothing, and it could be something. And I wasn't an employee where I had to remember this specific script that they wanted me to remember for hours on end and then get there and show up and like be something that they wanted me to be. I could instead shift that into, okay, I'm going to create something of my own.
And I also think like, yes, 100% what you say is true. I have a show on Hulu, and that was when I first started making videos. My absolute number one dream was to host a travel show. Wow. And I have nothing bad to say about any of the people involved with the making of that show. It was a blast to make. But on the same side, like you've said, in order to make something bigger, you have to remove an element of creative control that as a creator, you're used to having. And so once you remove that element of that creative control, the thing is no longer yours. You lose a really important say over what the tone is, the feel is, and you lose control over the image of yourself that's presented to the rest of the world. And I think that in itself is probably why so many established mainstream media personalities are looking at the freedom of having their own platforms and saying, you know what, like I'm going to put my energy into building this because I can actually truly be myself, say what I believe in. And there's not some bigwig somewhere in a studio who's never met me before, who's dictating how I come across to millions of people.
And you hear the television shows that are often the most successful, things like The Simpsons, they don't get notes from executives higher up the order. It's actually left to the people and their own creative control to make the best show they possibly want. Of course, if we're being honest though, especially from here in New Zealand, the double-edged sword is then finances. I mean, yes. If you're making a product in New Zealand for New Zealand, not that with the internet you need to, or anyone necessarily does. Like probably, I think it's about 35% of my audience is offshore at the moment. But still, you're coming from, I remember I worked a mid-dawn show, that's midnight to 6 a.m. on Talkback in radio. Per capita, I had more listeners on that show than Bill O'Reilly had in his show on Fox News. And he was the biggest, the number one news show in cable for whatever it was. But because our population is so small, you can't monetize that 100,000 people as he could monetize his 3 million people. And so that's the double-edged sword, especially for New Zealanders. Without the finances to have the freedom, you're then a bit of stuck in the cycle sometimes.
It's always a risk. I think creativity, it's sort of, it is a double-edged sword. And I have a lot of people that reach out that say, hey, how can I do what you're doing? And I think a lot of the time they have to think about, are they wanting to do it specifically because that's what they want to do for a living, or is it because they love it and they're so passionate about it and they would do it whether they had a 9-to-5 job or not? Like, I can sit here honestly today, right now, and tell you that if I got a 9-to-5 job, I would still do what I do right now. I wouldn't skip a beat. And I was doing it when I was working a 9-to-5 job. I was working in banking, and I would go home and I would create my videos on the weekend. And that's how my channel originally took off, was because I was doing it because I was passionate about it.
That's the thing. Now that people have like found out, and you see these sensationalized news stories of some YouTuber making $50 million in ad revenue or something like that, they go super viral. Now that is out into the dialogue of creating, people are saying, well, I want to be a YouTuber just because I can make money.
Yeah.
And when that is the driving force, I don't know who said it, but I think it's like an old Greek story. And it says that, like, essentially, long story short, there's a goddess of wealth and there's a goddess of knowledge. And if you pursue the goddess of wealth, well, she's just going to keep moving and she's going to keep going, and you're never going to be able to get her, no matter how hard you pursue. Whereas if you pursue the goddess of knowledge, then, the goddess of knowledge is going to allow you to gain knowledge from her. And then the goddess of wealth will get jealous and come over, and actually you don't have to pursue her. She's going to come and give you that. So if it's about money, if you're starting first and foremost with just the desire to make money, then it's probably, I'm not going to say that it can't be successful. It can, but
we see it out there sometimes.
But is it going to be fulfilling?
No. And will it be what it's supposed to be? It is just what, it's kind of, you have to let your passion lead you when it comes to these things in life. And if you're making these choices, especially something that takes as much time as
bit of a glitch there on the internet. We're back with you now.
Okay.
A lot of the times I feel like it can look really easy, right? It can look like you put the camera up or the microphone up and then it's up, and but there's a lot of back end, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of energy that goes into it. And if you're looking to go into something, you got to have the passion behind it, because it's just not as easy as it looks.
Yeah,
totally.
There is kind of that, I guess, it's not that it's moving into the mainstream, but there is that YouTube world, like the world of Mr. Beast, that seems to be going into producers, large staff, all those sorts of things as well. I think that's awesome, because if they can make enough money to have a staff of 5 or 10 and have producers and have executives above them, that's fine. I still in my gut kind of go, I don't necessarily like all his style, but I like the Joe Rogans of the world that are really just still a 2-man show, and they do big things just by themselves, and they haven't got a massive group around them, and they just get on with getting on. I like that idea of this is, people say, so I don't believe in the saying you can get a cheap laugh. Getting a genuine laugh out of someone is still a genuine laugh. You talked before about YouTube being looked down on a little bit because it's a camera in your bedroom. It's like, yeah, but to actually have a camera in your bedroom and then be engaging and then build an audience is actually a really big skill, because you don't have all the massive studio and the effects and stuff around you to help you get good content. You just got to be you have to be the good content.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it requires an element of like self-starter kind of outlook, and also you have to be autodidactic. You have to be able to teach yourself new skills, because when you're going down this road, you're inevitably going to hit a lot of roadblocks and come into situations where you do not know what to do. Luckily, the internet is there, and you can search and you can find information, and there's forums and
on YouTube itself.
Yeah, and you can find out. But even apart from that,
masterclass and things like that you can like really expand your
skill set,
because things change, quality gets better, people's attention spans change, time goes on, what people want to see from you change, so you have to be able to adapt.
But that being said, I'm by no means am I like anti traditional media. I think that on a project by project basis, you have to kind of take everything one step at a time. And I think that there's certain things that are capable with the backing of a production company or with the backing of a network that aren't capable or extremely difficult for you to pull off by yourself or in a small team. I think that the happy medium is finding a network or a production company that has leadership that is willing to believe in the talent and the skill set of an individual or a small group of like kind of hand-picked special forces creators, if you will, to go out and execute a vision of something and bring it back to then be taken to the wider audience using that network. And I think that that's kind of where it's going, you know?
Yeah, I think so. And I think probably what you'll find is some kind of amalgamation of, like of product, of content, of the vibe of the independents and maybe the money of the mainstream. Like as we go forward, there'll be some kind of bastard child between the two of them, and that'll be whatever entertainment is for the next 20 years. Like even I got a chance to talk to Russell Howard the other day, the comedian. I didn't quite get a chance to say this to him because we ran out of time. But I'm quite enjoying watching shows like John Oliver with no audience. You know, I'm quite enjoying watching his show. He has similar sorts of shows in the UK with no audience. And I wonder if companies are going, hey, you know, this still works without that other $40,000 per episode budget. We don't need that anymore. We can put that money elsewhere into the content rather than to the audience wrangler and having a bigger studio. You know, so I wonder if we'll come out of this and they'll have a bit of a, you know, we've sort of guerrillaed this for the past year. Let's take the best of the guerrilla and take the best of what we were doing with a full studio and find a better way forward.
Yeah, like I think in many ways COVID has forced production to scale down but also maintain quality. And I think that that's where, you know, finding those quote unquote guerrilla operators, you know, to make the best content you can with the smallest footprint. I mean, and also just, you know, look at the Kiwi-born director Taika Waititi. You know, right? He started with in the Shadows, which is hilarious, but also extremely DIY feel to it. Mm-hmm. And then now he's, you know, directing the blockbusters Thor and Marvel and The Mandalorian, and I don't know if you've seen any of that, but I mean, it goes to show you do need. If you want to climb the ladder, you need to have the proper skill set and the right mentality, but also the perseverance. You know, it takes time.
And you get someone like him who's unique. He changed the Marvel universe because Thor Ragnarok was like none of the others in the whimsical, light-humored nature of it. Yeah. Like you watch it. I haven't said this yet, but I was going to write a bit on it. But you look at the latest Wonder Woman 84, god awful. And I think what they've tried to do is try and be whimsical and a bit silly, sort of like Taika was in Ragnarok, but they've missed the mark completely. It is, in my opinion, I'm sorry if you guys enjoyed the movie, but in my opinion, a tragic piece of crap that should not be seen compared to the first Wonder Woman, which was amazing. And I haven't seen
the new one.
God awful.
I don't know.
God
but
awful.
It's probably because it doesn't have a Kiwi in the helm with that tongue-in-cheek sense of humor.
Yeah, there's a special humor to it. Like, that's one thing that I also really love about New Zealand. There's this, I can't even put my finger on it, but there's this like tone of comedy that is like nowhere else.
Yeah, it's great. We're huge fans. Flight of the Conchords, you know. Even we just watched the Jumanji movie because we're in lockdown and we're just scrolling around on Netflix. Yeah, the new one with the Rock. But my favorite character appearance was Murray from Flight of the Conchords.
Ray Starby, yeah. And look, one of the things I was going to ask, a couple of things. We're jumping around the place, and we're going to wrap up soon. But you can see how this is a bit of a TARDIS. You just jump in here and start talking, and the time flies. Because you were talking about your roots to New Zealand there, Alex. And what I was going to say is, there's a really vital part of getting to know who you are by spending time on the land where your ancestors' bones are. It's a really, it's a kind of a, I'm not Maori at all. I make that clear every time. You can tell that I'm Irish by the ridiculous ginger beard and the kind of pale blue skin. But there's a really, really important philosophy about the bones of our ancestors being in the ground that we walk on, you know, and just the concept of being back in a place in New Zealand, spending some time and living where some of your ancestors' bones are. I know without telling you how to suck eggs that you'll find it probably different from Carrie a little bit, but Carrie being, you know, attached to Alex, you'll get a part of that vibe as well. And it's very, very different. It's a very different feel. So I don't know quite how to describe it, but as you sort of experience New Zealand more, and I know you guys have been here, but like you become part of the country and you become part of the land. It has a different feel to it. Like I've got ancestors' bones in Northern Ireland, and it's a different feel. You know, and I always tell people my story is, as I said, I'm not Maori at all, but the Maori story is so important to all New Zealanders, even the rednecks who want to reject it, that the way I look at it and always kind of say to people, encourage them to give it a go, is to be a part of New Zealand, you need to be a part of the Māori story. The Māori story needs to be a part of your life, because the Māori story is a part of the New Zealand story. So if that's not a part of someone's story who's in New Zealand or who's in New Zealand, then they're missing a huge part of what New Zealand is. So I've always described it that the Māori story is not part of my bloodline, it's not part of my family line, but it is a part of my story because I'm a New Zealander and New Zealand is a part of my story. And then you get into the bones being in the land, and it's just it's a beautiful kind of way to be very quickly part of the country and part of the land.
Yeah, I know we have, I've got my book. I'm doing my best to learn Te Reo Māori. And when I was down in Dunedin studying, my dad came down and visited.
Cool.
And we wanted to, we don't have Māori in our blood either. We're Pākehā, but we went down to, my relatives left England in 1879 on a ship called the Adamant, which was left from Gravesend in England and was lost at sea. And they actually thought that it sunk because it didn't arrive for about 3 or 4 months after it was supposed to arrive. It was stranded off the coast of Brazil. And my relative, Nathaniel Ayling, was, they arrived in Invercargill. And that kind of, we knew that he and his family were buried there, but we didn't know which cemetery or where. And when my dad and I, we rented a car from Dunedin and drove down through the Catlins and down to Invercargill. We got some oysters and Bluff, and then we went up. And the first graveyard that we visited there, we started walking around, and literally within 5 minutes, I was just walking in the direction I felt I should walk, and we found the grave completely covered over in moss. And we scraped that off, and lo and behold, there was Nathaniel and his the graves for his son, one of whom died in the Boer War, and his wife, and that whole lineage of our family that had kind of been forgotten about. And my dad actually went and he paid for a new headstone.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I do feel a connection to New Zealand and to the people here and to the land. And I'm a cultural anthropologist and a historian. That's what I studied in university. And when I came to the University of Otago, I took Maori history class, as well as a class about the First World War here in Gallipoli and kind of how that was like the making of the nation. So we are very adamant to learn as much as we can about the culture.
And I want to say, like, you mentioned like by association, and I think for that's our lunch.
Excellent.
I think for me, I have a tendency to feel others' experiences
very viscerally.
Very deeply. And
An empath.
and when we were coming off the plane, people were saying, "Welcome home" to Alex. I'm already feeling emotional about it. And I started to tear up and I started crying. Alex is laughing at me and he's like, "I have to take a picture of this." And I just started to tear up because he's my husband, right? And so for me, it was really special to watch him kind of, going back to his roots, going back to his country, people saying "welcome home." And it's not my roots, but I feel it. And I'm really, I feel really grateful to get to experience it with him.
Yeah, and look, don't take lightly what I said about, you have access to it. It's not like, the wife, she can join in on the side. I was like, no, you have access to it. I think one of the emails we've been going backwards and forwards with, Alex, I think I said to you, I used the Kiwis and I called you brother or something, welcome home. And I think I said soon to be Kiwi sister in one of the emails I sent you because it's available. It's like it's there to be taken and it's available. And the thing about it, I think most, and I mean, like I said before, there's always some dicks in every country, but most people, if you say I want it, they'll offer it to you freely. So it's there.
Yeah, and I feel it. I feel that welcome. I really do. And I'm just grateful.
I wanted to know as well, and we'll wrap up now because you guys have got food, but you mentioned sort of sense of humour. I was just going to ask Alex, being someone who's basically lived in America but with an association to New Zealand, do you feel New Zealand differently, do you think? And sense of humour is a really good way to look at it. I mean, we're a bit British with our sense of humour. I mean, not saying we don't like the American sense of humour, but we are a bit more British than anything else. Do you feel like compared to your friends back in the US, you get things differently when it comes to the Kiwi culture? You understand, because obviously your dad would have been all over faulty towels and Fred Dag and all those sorts of things.
And like I grew up reading Barry Crump,
right.
like my
brilliant.
dad. And so, yeah, totally. And also, I think Kiwi humor is obviously it's derived from British humor, but it is different. It's distinctly different. But yeah, I mean, I would grow up, and one of my favorite films growing up was was Snatch, that Guy Ritchie film. And, I remember showing that to some of my friends back home and they missed all of the jokes.
Right.
Like every single one. And they were like, "Why do you love this film so much?" And I was like, "Look, if you don't get it, then you don't get it." But yeah, I mean, the Kiwi humor is distinct and I love it because it is very tongue in cheek, and you have to be able to kind of hold your own a little bit. Like if you're a little bit too sensitive sometimes and you take things a little too seriously, then, it could come off as being kind of a chuff comment. But, I mean, that's just part of it. And
your dad,
I grew up with my dad and his sense of humor, and he's a hilarious guy. And, my whole life growing up, I would bring friends over and they would say like, my dad would be like, "Oh yeah, Bob's your uncle." And it's like, people are like, "Wait, who, what?" Like they just couldn't understand. And I still, sometimes he says things and I'm like, "Look, Dad, I have no idea what you just said."
What are you referencing right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of Kiwiisms. We have a little book that's like a little handbook for translating Kiwiisms to American
His
English.
mom got it for us.
My mom got it way
Right.
back in like 1980 when she
To understand her husband.
Yeah. So we're going to be using that as we go along. But no, we're really, really excited to be here. We're really excited for this chapter, and we can't wait to connect more with Kiwi and with our fauna and with the whenua, and we're doing our best, so we're excited.
Well, don't feel under pressure. It's celebrate your successes, do as good as you can do, and don't worry about getting up to speed too quickly. It'll come, especially if you're living here now. I mean, we haven't really talked about the longevity for how long you're going to be here for, but I don't think we need to talk about that today. We'll just today is today, and we'll live in today. And
we'll say this on our when we arrived. What did we put?
Permanent.
So, we don't have plans to go back just yet.
I guess welcome home from me as well to both of you. And I was just looking at your shot there, because we've got two beautiful people on our podcast today. I think you need to get nice and close so I can get a nice thumbnail. You know how this works.
Yeah.
There you go. Look at that. There's a beautiful. That's gonna be the beautiful thumbnail for our show. And I'm sure that once you get out of isolation, which we haven't really talked about as well. See, the funny thing about this is just time flies. As I'm sure at some stage you're going to be heading around New Zealand. When you're down south, make sure you connect. You're welcome to come back in. We'll do another one.
Captain Cook's still there?
The Captain Cook has changed.
Oh no!
In fact, what's happened? When were you here? About 10 years ago?
2009.
Wow, 12 years ago now. Yeah, so in the student quarter, a lot of the pubs have shut in the student quarters, I guess just financial reasons. Captain Cook building is still there, but it's changed. It's no longer operating what it once was. But
well, we'll grab a pint somewhere.
I'm sure we'll make it happen. It's been so nice to chat to you. Let me just bring up here again. If people want to find out more about you guys, and I'll bring it up on the screen if people want to see it. Alex the Vagabond on YouTube, and also you've got Carrie Rad on YouTube as well there. Easy to find. Look at those. How to clear for your indoor plants. Starting a veggie garden. Well, that's going to be an interesting question. About if you're doing a lot of plant stuff and stuff, Carrie, what are you going to be doing in New Zealand, and where are you going to be focused on? But maybe that's for the next conversation. We can have a conversation around plants.
To build another vegetable garden. I'm just like, I can't wait to grow food.
Yeah, we would love to find a place where we have some space in the backyard for big garden and some animals, and and just go from there.
And now that you've got, I mean, on the end of my email is my email signature. If you ever get stuck out and about and someone says something weird to you, and you're like, what the crap does that mean? Just text me and I can be your Google Translate if you need it to be.
Love it. Yeah, because Google Translate does not translate Kiwiism.
Hey, it's been so much fun having you guys on, Alex and Carrie. Carrie and Alex, thanks for coming. And totally welcome to New Zealand. As you guys were talking about the comments and things that were said on that article from Stuff, what I loved was there was a bunch of shit at the bottom. People saying, no, they hardly see like they're essential. But the last two comments, the one at the top, I've shut it down so I can't read it verbatim. But the second to last comment was something like, I follow these guys online. They've been planning it for well over, a year. This is not a new thing. And then the very, very top one, it said something like, look, guys, they're already here. Just be kind. And I think that's probably a good way to wrap everything up.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. And haters gonna hate, but you just gotta keep moving forward. So
all the best, guys. Enjoy the last couple of days in isolation, and we'll talk soon.
All right. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye. Lunchtime.